Well, hello, Faith family, and thanks again for joining me on the Daily Connection. It's a time when we get together in the Word, and more importantly, the Word gets into us. So, our theme this week is living a life connected to Christ, the life of victory. And we're looking specifically at 1 John chapter 5. Brother Aaron kicked us off yesterday in verse 1. Today is going to relate to that with a statement that may sound out of place with the idea of victory, but I think I can make the connection for us. So, let's get into the verse. 1 John 5, verse 2. This is how we know that we love God's children, when we love God and obey His commands. Now, the reason why I said that may sound odd is because we're used to hearing it in the reverse order. This is how we know we love God, because we love His children. And of course, if you're familiar with the letter of 1 John, you know that's a major theme throughout the letter, is that the way that we show that we truly know God and that we love God is in how we interact with one another, how we love the brethren. And so a question that may come to mind, in fact, the writer of the Student Edition devotion asked this: how does God's law help us to love others? You know, and back in the context of this, how does our ability or our obedience to God's law, demonstrate that we do in fact love God's children? Well, and it kind of goes back to, even if we look at a very strict understanding of law, it helps us to see that the law was set up not just to guide our interaction with God, but it was also set up to guide our interaction with our fellow man. For instance, go all the way back to Exodus chapter 20, where God is giving the law to the people through Moses. He starts off, you gotta love me above all others, no graven images, don't take the Lord's name in vain, going through those steps of guiding our love for Him. But before He's done, He transitions first with the statement, honor your father and your mother. So there is a relational love in regards to that family unit, a child's responsibility to love their parent, and that will be directly reflective of how they love God. And then He goes into some other things. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't give false testimony against your neighbor. So here we see actions forbidden in regards to how we interact with our fellow man. And that's to then be reflective of how we view God. And of course, Jesus set that into the context of the Great Commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, obviously, in 1 John, when he says the children of God, we're talking about fellow believers. We can expand that out clearly. I mean, the commands given in Exodus and then reaffirmed by Jesus, summarized, obviously, in the Great Commandment, tell us that any human being created in the image of God, we are to love that individual, and our love for them is a direct reflection of our love for God. And so when he says that this is how we know we love God's children, when we obey God's commands, that word obey there is important because it can really mean to put it into practice. So it doesn't just mean to obey in terms of observing a requirement. It really means obey more in terms of you're actually following, or you're actually putting into practice what He commanded us to do. And that brings to mind what He said earlier on in chapter 2. If you have a moment, go back and read 1 John 2, starting in verse 3. This is how we know that we know Him, if we keep His commandments. The one who says, I have come to know Him, and yet doesn't keep His commands is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps His word, truly in him the love of God is made complete. This is how we know we are in Him. Now listen, the one who says he remains in Him should walk just as He walked. And that's obviously got to refer to Jesus, because Jesus is the life demonstration of who God is, and is the life that we are now modeling. We should, as born-again believers, now modeling our life after. And hey, if anyone showed us how to love, Jesus did. And He made it clear that His love for humanity was an overflow of His love for God. That what He did for humanity, He did out of love for the Father and out of a love for what God was doing in redeeming sinful man. So one last question is, why is it impossible to love without obeying God's commands? Because God has so instituted and so designed His commands that to love Him, it will naturally then lead us to love one another as the children of God specifically, and to love our neighbor, those who are not born again yet in Christ, to love them as well by not murdering, by not stealing from them, by not coveting the things they have, by not doing the things that will ultimately bring harm against them, and more importantly, bring a negative view of who God is as we claim to represent Him. And that then, my friends, will give that life of victory. That will put us into that living as He lived, walking as He walked, as He said in 1 John 2. That will demonstrate that we are living the life of victory. Well, I hope your week is going well. Pray that we are getting our hearts ready for our Good Friday celebration, which will be coming up this coming Friday evening. Prepare your hearts now, and looking forward to seeing you here 6 o'clock this Friday. And then, of course, Resurrection Sunday, the celebration day, the day that makes the Christian faith what it is. For without the empty tomb, our faith is worthless, Paul said. So please make plans to attend. Please prepare your heart for that. And until we're together, live sent.